Well, Kevin, those talks are still ongoing. We hope to bring you a final decision by 10 o'clock tonight on 5 Eyewitness News. Regardless, this is a project that has generated quite a bit of excitement. In fact, earlier today, I stopped by Paisley Park, bumped into two men from South Carolina in town, and they said they just had to give it a look.
It really was for dozens of people who happened to stop by when all of this happened. Now you can see here behind me that the store is dark. It has been closed ever since this gunfire broke out. We do know that tonight police are talking with several people of interest, but no one is in custody. And while one person was hurt, others certainly could have been.
Well, Kevin and Lindsay, you know, we're here at the football game, and it's pretty much normal game. But on Wednesday, nothing normal at the school. I talked to several parents, several students today, and they all told me multiple fights happen at the school. Definitely, they said this is not a one-off. It's been happening for quite a while.
In this proposed agreement, the Minneapolis Park Board wants to lease the park back to the city and outlines costs at $20 million to build the park and another $2 to $3 million every year just to run it.
She's one of 8,500 Minnesotans asking themselves the same question. And next year, they'll be joined by another 57,000 who will also lose unemployment extensions. That's 65,000 people affected in the state from a decision made across the country by Congress. Both Minnesota Senators Franken and Klobuchar argued for an extension. In this email, they insisted benefits are a critical component of our ongoing recovery.
DPS says the new policy is part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen data protection. We're committed to protecting private data, keeping it secure, and making it available only to those who qualify to see it under the law.
Strong words from Father Bill DeZiel. In part, things can't seem to be more twisted and out of hand, and later, it may be time for a do-over with our archdiocesan leadership. Lyons says Archbishop Neinstead should step aside.
It's horrible. It's despicable. It's unmentionable.
We do have a problem because many times the community and law enforcement are talking past each other.
Loaves and Fishes added a food truck to get to places that weren't being served, created a farm-to-table program to make food nutritious, served more meals to kids out of school for the summer, and doubled the number of dining sites.
It should have been the busiest time of year in Austin, but back at the start of the school year, the quiet on the football field was deafening. Word had spread in this small Minnesota town that 14-year-old Chris Fisher had died in a Rochester hospital 11 days after he collapsed on this field during practice.
You just worry about it. You worry about that stuff.
Sudden cardiac arrest in young athletes is something Dr. Jay Sengupta with the Minneapolis Heart Institute says we're learning more about by the day, thanks in part to genetic testing and even more so to the families who sign on to allow it.
So whenever we have a tragic event in the community where someone passes away tragically at a young age for unclear reasons, oftentimes their family is referred to a center like ours for further evaluation, to potentially try to identify what the cause was.
Statistics show it only happens to 1 in every 40 to 50,000 people, but we've covered too many. Most recently, the death of Chris Fisher. In 2014, it was Patrick Schoonover, who halted the world of hockey after suffering a sudden cardiac death minutes after he scored a goal in a Brainerd hockey tournament. He, too, was only 14 years old.
There are many syndromes and conditions that we can't necessarily see if we were to look at the heart through an ultrasound or an MRI.
And that's where genetic testing comes in. Dr. Sengupta says with the family's approval, the medical examiner will save a blood sample following these events and send it to the Minneapolis Heart Institute for further research on the genetic code behind these underlying abnormalities.
It's a puzzle, and we're looking for clues.
Clues that can help families identify if this gene lies in any siblings, parents, or grandparents, and to finally unlock more needed answers to a rare tragedy that still happens too often.
For competitive skiers,
it's going to be really fast today.
A warm winter event means more prep.
Where it's ground up ice, you have to put what's called clister. It's kind of like a jelly.
A lot more wax. And simpler goals.
Stay upright. That might be one of the challenges today.
From the moment the first race of the day began, staying upright was a challenge, even for the most experienced skiers. But cheering from the sidelines,
All right, Brad, let's go, Brad! All right, Brad!
that was easy.
All right, Kevin!
On this year's alternate Lopec course, skiers in most every event flew along the same route at Theodore Wirth Park's snowmaking loop, and at the end, received a winner's welcome.
Who's gonna get it? Oh my gosh!
Wow, how about that for a finish?
Because whether they're for fame or fun, or just to try on new skis for size, when the Loped is over, the proceeds go on to help a North Minneapolis youth program.
It's elementary age school, middle school kids, and all of those kids that possibly wouldn't be skiing without the support of the Loped Foundation.
This drone with the camera, it's watching us right now.
It's watching us right now.
It's the type of drone you've probably heard of. Already being used for all sorts of purposes by businesses around the world.
It's used a lot for inspection of things like mobile telephone towers, broadcast towers, power lines.
And in this case, we're using it to film U of M senior Ben Gollard climbing a rope with yours truly standing by.
You can wave.
But the truth is, in the world of aerospace engineering, this is all very 2015. That's because Eric here is controlling the drone, something his local company, Centera, along with U of M researchers, are working to make obsolete.
When we have a human in the loop, it's expensive, it's error-prone, and it's not very efficient.
So they've developed an autopilot system for drones, no pilot required.
Hundreds of sensors.
The technology itself is tiny, with a computer that's about the size of a credit card and sensors that tell the drone where it's going. And the U of M says it's already drawn interest from the likes of NASA.
How can you make aircraft lighter and more fuel efficient?
The U of M's Brian Taylor says, really, the possibilities are endless. He gave us the example of using this technology to inspect train tracks.
Not only is it cheaper because you have virtually no people involved in that, but you can inspect more frequently.
The technology is customizable and now available under a broad open source license, meaning in the not too distant future, don't be too concerned if you spot a drone without a pilot. At the U of M, Josh Rosenthal, 5 Eyewitness News.
He's not a teammate or a friend. In fact, many of these kids had never heard of Jacob Wetterling until this week. But tonight,
the number 11, everybody understand what that symbolizes?
He's the reason they huddle.
A boy your age is no longer with us.
He's the reason they learn.
All right, it's a tribute. Let's do it for him.
He's the reason they play.
1, 2, 3, Jacob!
There's nothing that can comfort the Wetterlings. There's nothing. But it's like, what can we do to show that they have our support?
The Elk River 6th grade football team honoring Jacob Wetterling with his number on their helmets is a symbolic gesture of support from these players and their parents.
He was just such a well-rounded child, you know, and it's just sad, you know, how things happen to him.
These are all our boys, the same age as what Jacob was, and that I can't imagine what those parents went through. I cannot.
Head coach Mark Rossmeisel isn't afraid to teach these boys about the importance of being there for those in need.
You always hear, hug your kid every day. Tell the ones that you love them every day. And it really comes to light on something like this when this happens. All right, defense, let's go!
And now, because of this game, these kids will always remember Jacob, what he did for this state, and what his legacy will continue to do as they grow up.
Years ago, you didn't really have to worry about your children, and then things happen like this, and it just makes you more aware that you can just lose anybody in just a heartbeat.
Tonight, his number is on their helmets, but from now on, Jacob's hope is in their hearts.
We're just going to do a return on it.
They don't sell guns here at Best Pawn in St. Paul, but you can buy a BB gun.
You don't need to have a license. You don't have to have any kind of registration or anything.
They're easy to buy, and because this man bought one, the definition of a BB gun is up for debate.
They found a BB gun pistol in the glove box of his car.
His name is David Lee Haywood. 3 years ago, he was pulled over in a traffic stop, and police found this type of BB gun in his car. Since Haywood is a convicted felon, he was charged with possession of a firearm by an ineligible person and was convicted. sentenced to 5 years in prison.
We're saying, this isn't a firearm, it's a BB gun, and therefore he shouldn't have been convicted under this law.
Attorney Grant Gibo represents Haywood, who appealed his conviction. The State Court of Appeals upheld it. Now the Supreme Court has agreed to review the case.
And if you look at any dictionary definition, if you look elsewhere in our criminal code, a firearm requires explosive force. It needs to fire a bullet. So that's why we're saying that this object doesn't fit the definition.
The Minnesota Supreme Court plans to hear the case this spring.
If you ask the average person out on the street today, is a BB gun a firearm? They're all going to say no.
I would say no, because they don't have the gunpowder. They're an air charge.
Pawn shop owner Larry Casella will closely watch the Supreme Court's ruling.
It is interesting, because I don't know if it's a gray area or not. I mean, obviously it is.